Now, 20 days after the attack on southern Israel, my heart still breaks. I think easily these have been the most three difficult weeks of my 12 years at Beth Am. And I just personally can't stop reading the newspaper, Haaretz, the Times of Israel, the Jerusalem Post, the ADL blog, and each time my heart continues to break as I read stories. And I think I don't know what to tell my children. I don't know if I should try to explain it to them. I don't know how much to tell them if I do try to tell them. And I don't know always how to protect them. I'm not on Facebook or Twitter, but my email is full every day from different Jewish organizations that I'm sure many of you are connected to. I try to read the emails and sometimes I delete them. I try to read the statements and connect to my family members, and you just don't know what to do. At Beth Am, over the last 3 weeks, we've hosted gatherings and come together in ways small and large. We hosted a gathering with an area family therapist for parents of young children. Cantor Spall and I last week hosted a Zoom gathering for our Beth Am college students. Students signed on from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. Our 20s and 30s group, The Orchard, led by Emily, who's in the back, gets together to hold space for questions and hesitations and emotions. Our youth education program are writing cards to two kibbutzim in the south, Kibbutz Holit, Kibbutz Magen, who were attacked by Hamas. And we've heard so many stories. We know that we have friends whose family members have now been called up. And many of us have received an outpouring of support from our friends and neighbors. I received hugs at Little League games and messages from area pastors. But I've also heard some of us who are afraid to send our kids to public school and who are afraid to wear a Magan David around their neck. So what do we do? 3 weeks after the most tragic day upon the Jewish people since the Holocaust? This Shabbat is Parashat Lech Lecha, the third portion of the book of Genesis. So let me offer 3 things that I'm thinking about. And if you have a thought or an emotion, I would love to hear it as well. Number 1, continue to be a proud Jew. All the Jewish things we do matter. Show up at services, study Torah, light Shabbat candles, say Kiddush. Don't take your mezuzah off the door. Do not stop assembling in your synagogues together. Do not take the Star of David off from around your neck. Do not stop sending your kids to Sunday school. Do not stop living proudly as Jews. Do not stop calling and texting your Israeli friends and family. Do not stop donating money to Israeli organizations like we are doing this month and next month at Beth Am. The Joint Distribution Committee's Southern Israel Relief this month, Lekit Israel, the Israeli National Food Bank next month. Usually we average a little less than $1,800 a month in our monthly tzedakah. As a community, I hope we can increase that maybe tenfold each month. We should continue to attend local rallies, like the Bay Area United one in San Francisco on Sunday. And also being a proud Jew means supporting Jews here. You see anti-Semitism, and we know it's on the rise. The ADL tells us the 400% from this week last year. We call it out. We call our local law enforcement. We report it to HR, as one of our members did just yesterday after seeing a swastika at her work in Santa Clara. I said that Cantor Spall and I Zoomed with some of our college students earlier this week. It's really hard to be a college student these days. This is what one of them emailed us afterwards. I think the reason I'm feeling so isolated is that the administration has failed to adequately respond to the situation or voice their support for us. They are simply putting out messages saying things to the effect of, "I acknowledge this is a difficult time. Take care of yourself." However, they are not making that possible. Our counseling center and chaplains still have huge wait times to even get an initial consultation. Furthermore, our dean went to a Students for Justice Palestine rally and marched with them, even after SJP refused to acknowledge that Hamas was a terrorist organization and put out a message effectively supporting the violence as a form of resistance. Furthermore, SJP has signage everywhere and it's hard to escape it all, since it's at the center of campus. I tried to talk to some of my friends the other day, but they kept saying, "How do you think Palestinians feel?" Even with our Kihilat Shalom program, people are refusing to discuss the situation because it's too controversial. I just feel like no real processing space has been provided for us, and SJP is dominating the campus. So what do we do? One, I'll recommend that we reach out to our Hillel at your alma mater and ask if there are ways that you can help. Don't tell them what they should do, but ask if there are ways that they can help and offer your services. Make financial donations to the Hillel on the campus, or maybe the campus where your children went to college. We need to support those organizations that are working with our college Jews today. And if you know of college students, text them. Wish them a Shabbat Shalom, ask how they're doing, and even send them a challah from a local bakery. On Friday, Rabbi Heath and I, we text our college students, go through the list, and we wish them Shabbat Shalom. Number two, what can we do? Everything we need to do to redeem the captives. Hidyon Shivuim. Bring the hostages home. The Talmud calls the redemption of captives the great mitzvah. And the Shulchan Aruch, the legal code from the 15th century, says every moment that one delays unnecessarily the ransoming of a captive is it as if he were to shed blood. We must keep more than the 220 hostages, ranging from ages from 3 to 90, that continue to be held by Hamas in our minds and on our tongues. Time is of the essence, and we need them home. And we must learn their stories and continue to share their stories. And I've read so many stories. Here's just one of them. Moran Yanai, the 40-year-old Israeli artist and jeweler who had a passion for creating art to wear. Her jewelry designs incorporate delicate pearls set against silver and stainless steel chains, reflecting various cultures from around the world. Her work is characterized by bits of brightness and optimism, and she is eagerly looking forward to exhibiting her jewelry at a big exhibition for the first time. Beyond her artistic pursuits, Moran was known for her kind and sensitive nature. She has a deep compassion for people and animals. Her brother-in-law, Dan Moore, describes her as having an incredibly soft and kind-hearted soul, and her sensitivity extends to concern for animals, not just pets, but farm animals and wildlife. She is so compassionate, according to her brother-in-law, that you couldn't even eat meat in her presence, and she couldn't bear the thought of animals being harmed. Tragically, Moran went missing after attending the Desert Musical Festival, and her disappearance left her family deeply concerned and searching for answers. Despite the anguish caused by her disappearance, Moran's family and loved ones continue to share her story and talk about her kind and caring nature, emphasizing her big heart and the positive impact she has had on so many lives. They're continuing to hope for her safe return and remain devoted to keeping her memory alive. That's our job too, as this community, We need to keep these stories front and center. We need to call our elected officials, and our elected officials truly have been amazing. President Biden and Secretary Blinken have been terrific. Thought President Biden's speech last week will go down as one of the great speeches about Zionism in this era. But the work continues, and we must pressure Secretary Blinken and President Biden. This is how we do it. We pick up the phone, we call our elected officials, and we say, it's day 20. Our hostages still aren't home. And let's be honest, the individual government that has the most impact on freeing these hostages is going to be the United States. So we need, as a community, as a Jewish community, as a Beth Am community, to continue to talk and keep these hostages on the front of everyone's mind. I listened to a conversation with Jonathan Polin and Rachel Goldberg, originally from Berkeley, who last saw their son Hirsch at the Friday night before he also attended the music festival near the Gaza border. He is also one of the 220 hostages now in Gaza. And this is what they said. They were in conversation at Central Synagogue in New York. Jonathan said, there are two things I ask of you. One, this is a big story right now, even though we're only on day 18. And it may drag on as a big story to day 20 or 25 or 30, but soon there are going to be other news stories, and we need to keep this front and center. It helps to call your elected officials every single day. This is what we need. We have been told repeatedly by elected officials to make sure we stay in their mind. This is what I ask people do. Rachel continued, we want you to be a little mosquito, the one that is so annoying when you're trying to sleep, to call your senator and your elected official all the time. Because it's going to be our government that influences how these things play out. We cannot forget them. They need to come home. Number 3, we need to maintain our decency and humanity. The moment we forget to see the humanity in Palestinians, we lose something of our own humanity. This is really hard to do. The images of October 7th will never vanish from the Jewish soul. The stories remain haunting. There are those who say that this is no time to talk about human rights. But we must reject barbaric calls for annihilations of Palestinians. We must decry acts of blind vengeance, including by Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Killing thousands more Palestinian civilians will not bring back the Israeli civilians who are so bitterly and excruciatingly mourned. Even as we support Israel's moral right, and they do have a moral right to wage war against Hamas. In the words of Rabbi Daniel Hartman, a just war must also be fought justly. As a community, we mourn the deaths of innocent Palestinians caught in this nightmare. We should, as a community, encourage safe passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza, including medicine and water and food. And we know that there are millions of Palestinians who want to live a life decently and whose main concern, just like ours, is the physical and mental health of their children. This doesn't mean we have to sit down and be nice to Hamas. We shouldn't do that with terrorists. We are against Hamas. We aren't against Palestinians. We aren't against Islam. And we also need to know that constant bombs and assaults by ground troops will never bring about an end to this conflict alone. That conversation and a negotiation will be necessary. That true peace will never come by force. We're going to have to find a way to reimagine and regain the focus and to see the humanity of one another. I really liked this opinion piece by Michael Sfard in Haaretz last week. On Saturday, October 7th, Hamas committed an abominable war crime for which there can be no forgiveness. Our eyes see, but our hearts refuse to believe that human beings can be capable of such cruelty. An inconceivable slaughter of hundreds of civilians in their own homes and at the scene of a party. The abductions of civilians, the abductions of children and the elderly, and sadistic psychological abuse of family whose loved ones have disappeared. The truth is that this is a crime against humanity, a crime against everything human. Each of us knows someone who was murdered or abducted or whose relatives were wounded. Tens of thousands of Israelis will walk around in the coming years with severe psychological wounds, some from shell shock and some from PTSD. The atrocity is impossible to grasp. And yet, the laws of war weren't designed only for situations in which our blood is cool, in which there is no justified anger or understandable desire for revenge. The laws of war constitute humanity's renunciation of the idea of a complete prohibition on the use of force, its renunciation of the pacifist worldview, in exchange for an approach that sets rules of basic humanity and boundaries on the harm to civilians. Every solution to this bloody conflict ultimately includes respecting the rights of all people, both in Gaza and in Sderot, to live with security and human dignity. And that begins with respecting the most basic rules as set down in the international laws of war, which are designed to reduce the harm to civilians. So those three things: be proud Jews, bring the hostages home, maintain our decency and humanity. Those are the three things I'm sitting with on this Shabbat, because I still believe fundamentally Israelis and Palestinians want to find a way not to live in a cycle of violence. And unless a horizon of hope is provided in the future, Jews and Arabs, without seeing that, will continue to cycle into a vortex of despair. Let us continue to stand together, support one another, and work towards a better future, guided by our faith and our shared commitment to peace and humanity. Am Yisrael Chai. Our people Israel lives. Where else is there to go? We pray urgently for peace and a new vision of peace for the entire region. We pray for strength and decency, and with God's blessing, through our own tortured pain in love. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Let us be strong and strengthen one another. 253, our prayer for healing.